our kids spit out, "I like my real dad more than you." To my husband, he left and took revenge on us. Hey, Red, I don't even know where to begin. This is a mess I never imagined I'd be living through, and I feel like everything is crumbling around me. I'm here because I need to get this off my chest, to try and make sense of it all, and maybe get some advice on what to do next, because I honestly don't know anymore. The worst thing that could have happened has happened, and I still can't believe it. My name is Ashley, and I'm 33 years old. My husband, Josh, is 31, and we've been together for about 8 years, but married for 4. When Josh and I first met, I had just gotten out of a relationship. I was in a really bad place, emotionally vulnerable, and things between me and my ex, Matt, had ended on terrible terms. We had been together for years, and I thought he was the one, but it ended up being toxic and abusive. Matt wasn't just emotionally manipulative. He was the kind of person who broke me down bit by bit. I was so stupid back then, because even though I knew it was bad for me, I stayed. I loved him, or at least, I was in love with the idea of him, and I guess I envied the person I thought he was. When it all fell apart, I was a wreck. I couldn't see a way forward, and I was dealing with all sorts of mental baggage from that relationship. Then, a few months later, I met Josh. He was the complete opposite of Matt, kind, stable, gentle. He treated me with a level of respect and care I hadn't experienced before. At first, I didn't think anything would come of it. I honestly thought he was just a rebound, but before I knew it, things got serious between us. But the thing is, before we got serious, I was still stupidly messing around with Matt. He was patient with me. He helped me put the pieces of myself back together, and I fell in love with him for that. He became my rock, and I felt like I could finally breathe again. Then, I found out I was pregnant. This is where everything starts going downhill, and I know what you're probably thinking. Did she even know who the father was? The truth is, I didn't. When I found out I was pregnant, it hit me like a brick. I had just started moving on from Matt, but in the back of my mind, I knew there was a chance the baby wasn't Josh's. I tried to do the math, but so much had happened all at once. I wasn't in the right state of mind to keep track of everything clearly. When I told Josh I was pregnant, he was over the moon. He didn't ask questions. He didn't suspect anything. He stepped up immediately, excited to be a father. He wanted to start a family, and I convinced myself that it didn't matter. I thought it was better not to tell him. I didn't want to complicate things, especially not after everything Josh had done for me. In my heart, I told myself that Josh was the father, regardless of biology. He was going to raise our baby, and I was going to let that be our reality. I buried the guilt deep down and convinced myself it would never come to light. I know now how wrong I was. I know keeping that secret was stupid, but at the time, I thought I was protecting him and protecting our family. We ended up having a beautiful boy, Max, and for 7 years, everything was fine. Josh was an amazing dad, the kind of father you see in those perfect little Instagram families. He loved Max, and Max adored him. I honestly started to believe my own lie, that it didn't matter, that everything would be okay as long as we never spoke about it. But secrets like that don't stay buried forever. After our son Max was born, the fear that he might not be Josh's biological child started to eat away at me. I had done the math, replayed the timing in my head over and over, and every time I couldn't shake the gnawing suspicion that the truth was worse than I wanted to admit. I wanted Max to be Josh's. I wanted everything to just be fine, for us to live happily ever after. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore the possibility. When Max was about 2 years old, the fear became too overwhelming to ignore. I convinced myself that I needed to know for sure, that it would give me some peace of mind. So yes, I did it. I went behind Josh's back and got a DNA test done. And the results? Well, just like I had feared all along, Max wasn't Josh's son. He was Matt's. I was devastated, but I was also paralyzed with fear. I couldn't bring myself to tell Josh. Now, before you all start tearing me apart in the comments, let me explain. Josh had been such an incredible father to Max. He loved him more than anything in the world. He absolutely adored him. The way Josh would light up whenever Max called him daddy, or how proud he was of Max's every little accomplishment. I couldn't bear the thought of shattering that. So I buried the truth. I hid the DNA results and never told him. Every time I thought about confessing, I just pictured the pain it would cause Josh, and I couldn't do it. I rationalized it over and over in my mind. Why ruin something that's good? I mean, Josh loved Max like his own. He was Max's father in every way that mattered, so why should biology change that, right? But looking back, that's where I messed up. That's where the real trouble began. Fast forward a few years, Max had just turned 6 and life had settled. Josh was working hard, being an amazing dad, and everything seemed stable. Until Matt reached out to me. I hadn't heard from him in years, not since the toxic mess we'd been tangled in before I met Josh. At first, I wasn't interested. I had moved on, or so I thought. But there was a part of me, a tiny part, that had always missed him. Not him exactly, but the version of him I had loved before everything went wrong. The version of him that I wished had been real. And then there was Max. He was Matt's biological son, after all. I thought, maybe this is the closure I need. Maybe if I meet with Matt, we can tie up those loose ends, and I can finally move forward without any lingering what-ifs. So like an idiot, I agreed to meet with him. I shouldn't have. I know that now. But at the time, I convinced myself it was the right thing to do, for me and for Max. I figured it was just a one-time thing, just to get closure and put the past behind me. But of course, things didn't go as planned. During that meeting, I made another huge mistake. I told Matt about Max. He was shocked at first, but then he became interested. He said he wanted to be a father to Max, that he regretted how things had ended between us, and that he wanted to step up. I'll admit, hearing him say that stirred up old feelings. The idea of him being involved in Max's life, of him finally being the person I had always wanted him to be, sounded tempting. But I knew better than to trust Matt completely. Still, there was a part of me that thought, maybe this is his chance to redeem himself. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad for Max to know who his real father was. Maybe it could give him something that I couldn't. But of course I had to consider reality. I had a life with Josh, a marriage, a family. I wasn't about to throw all of that away because Matt had suddenly decided to show some interest. So when Matt suggested meeting up with Max, I didn't know what to do. At first I refused. I told him it was impossible, that I had a family now, a husband, and a life that couldn't be disrupted. I told him straight up that he couldn't just walk into our lives now and destroy everything. Max already had a father, and that father was Josh. He couldn't just come in and take that away. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought Matt would back off. But Matt wasn't the kind of person to take no for an answer. He kept pushing, texting, calling, and reminding me that Max was his son too. He played the guilt card so well, telling me that Max deserved to know who his real father was, that keeping him away from his biological dad was selfish and wrong. He wore me down. I knew Matt. I knew how relentless he could be when he wanted something. And after weeks of pressure, I caved. I agreed to let him meet with Max in secret because, of course, I couldn't let Josh find out. I wasn't ready to face the consequences of that truth. The truth that Max wasn't his biological son. The truth that I had lied to him for all these years. Yes, I know it was stupid. I know it was wrong. I know that what I did was the worst possible decision, but sometimes, when you're caught between a rock and a hard place, you act out of fear. There's a part of me that always listened to Matt, even when I knew better, even after everything we went through, even after how toxic and painful our relationship had been. Deep down, there's a part of that traumatized girl inside me that was still recklessly in love with him. So Matt and I set up these secret meetings. At first, it was just a couple of times here and there. I justified it by telling myself that it wasn't really hurting anyone. Max was happy to meet his friend, Matt got to see his son, and Josh was none the wiser. I thought I had everything under control, but the more time Matt spent with Max, the more involved he wanted to be. He started texting me more frequently, asking for more time with Max. He wasn't satisfied with the occasional meeting anymore. He wanted to see Max regularly. He said things like, "He's my son too, Ashley. I have a right to be in his life." And with each meeting, I could feel the walls closing in around me. The lies were stacking up, and every time I looked at Josh, the guilt ate me alive. But instead of coming clean, instead of confessing the truth, I doubled down on the lies. I kept telling Josh I was taking Max to the park, or that we were visiting friends when, really, we were meeting up with Matt. I hated myself for it. I hated the lies, the deceit, and the way I was living this double life. But I felt trapped. I didn't know how to stop it without destroying everything. I knew that if I dared to cut Matt off, he would tell Josh. That wasn't just paranoia. Matt had made it clear in his own subtle, threatening way that he wasn't above it. He was definitely the kind of person who would blow everything up just to get what he wanted. He would ask about Josh in casual, chilling ways like, "How's Josh doing? You think he'd be happy to know his son is spending time with me?" It wasn't just a question, it was a veiled threat, and that's where I really screwed up. Instead of standing up to Matt, instead of cutting him out of our lives for good, I let him take control. I let him dictate the terms. I was so terrified of destroying my marriage and our perfect life that I convinced myself that this was the only way to keep the peace. But of course, Matt wasn't satisfied with just seeing Max. Oh no, he wanted more. He started talking to Max about how he was his real dad. He filled Max's head with all kinds of ideas, telling him that Josh wasn't his real father, that Josh was just some guy who was pretending, that the only reason I hadn't told him sooner was because I didn't want to upset Josh. Max was confused, of course. He didn't understand what was going on, but Matt kept pushing, kept feeding him these lies, and the worst part, I let it happen. I was too scared to stop it. I tried to do damage control, I tried to reason with Matt, but every time I stood up to him, he would remind me of the one thing I feared most. I'll tell Josh the truth. I was stuck. I had no choice but to let Matt say whatever he wanted to Max, just to keep him from ruining everything. I was living in constant fear, knowing that at any moment, my entire life could come crashing down. I didn't want to destroy my marriage, I didn't want to lose Josh, and I didn't want Max to grow up in a broken family. So I kept quiet. I let Matt play his games. I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could keep everything under control. But of course, that's not how things work. You can't build a life on lies and expect it to stand forever. Looking back, I realize how stupid I was. I should have never let Matt back into our lives. I should have told Josh the truth from the beginning. Matt continued to put things into Max's head, and of course Max, being the innocent kid that he was, believed him. Matt had this way of saying things that sounded so convincing, even to an adult, so it's no wonder that Max would absorb it all like a sponge. Every time they met, it seemed like Matt was trying harder to plant these ideas in Max's mind, to make him doubt everything he knew about his life with Josh. I tried to do damage control. I would try to debunk what Matt said to Max on the drive home or when we were alone together. I'd tell him, "Max, that's not true. Josh is your dad, and he loves you more than anything in this world." But no matter how much I tried to smooth things over, I could see the confusion growing in Max. He didn't know who to believe, and how could he? On one hand, he had Josh, the man who had been there for him since day one, loving him unconditionally. And on the other hand, he had Matt, this stranger who swooped in, telling him that he was his real dad and that everything he knew was a lie. I kept hoping that the damage wouldn't stick, that I could somehow manage it. But the more Matt was around, the harder it became to untangle the web of lies. I would do my best to assure Max that Josh was his dad in every way that mattered, but I could tell it wasn't enough. Max was starting to pull away from Josh, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer, and it was breaking my heart. And yet, as wrong as it was, there were moments, small moments, when things didn't feel like a total disaster. There were times when our outings with Matt actually felt like something real. There were times when it almost seemed like we were an actual family. We'd be at the park, and I'd watch Max running around laughing with Matt, and for a split second it felt normal. I'd catch myself smiling, enjoying those rare moments of peace where everything felt right. I know it sounds awful, but there were times when I actually enjoyed being around Matt again, when he acted like the father I always wished he could have been. It was surreal. I hated him for the damage he was causing, for the lies, for putting me in this impossible situation. But there was still a part of me that remembered the Matt I fell for all those years ago. The Matt who could be charming, funny, and caring when he wanted to be. And during those moments with Max, it was like I saw glimpses of that old version of him. the one who made me feel like the world wasn't such a dark place. I know how wrong that sounds. I know I shouldn't have let myself feel that way. But it was easy to get swept up in the fantasy of it all, especially when Max was so happy. For those brief moments, I could pretend that we weren't living this huge lie. I could pretend that Matt wasn't ruining everything. I could pretend that I hadn't betrayed Josh and that everything was fine. But of course, those moments never lasted. They were always followed by the crushing guilt of what I was doing. The more time Matt spent with Max, the more impossible it became to pretend. I was playing with fire, and I knew it. I knew that I was wrong for letting Matt back into our lives. I knew that every time I let him see Max, I was risking everything. My marriage, my family, my peace. But I kept doing it. And now, I don't even know how to fix the mess I've made. Of course, things finally came to a head that day. Josh and I had gotten into a really bad argument. And to be honest, the argument was totally my fault. I had bought a really expensive bag without telling him, even though we had joint accounts and most of the money in there was his. I had a job, sure, but it barely paid me anything. It was more of a hobby to pass the time. Josh was the sole provider, carrying all the financial weight, so when he found out about the bag, he was understandably outraged. He wanted me to return it, but I refused. I didn't want to return it because I really liked the bag. It felt like one of the few luxuries I could claim for myself. So we argued. For hours, it felt like. I kept digging my heels in, telling him he was overreacting, that it wasn't that big of a deal. But I knew it was. I knew it was expensive, and I knew I had no right to spend that kind of money without telling him. Still, I antagonized him, refusing to see reason. The more he pushed, the more I resisted. It got ugly. Then Max heard us. He must have been listening from his room because he came running in, looking upset. He didn't like the fighting, and I could tell he was trying to make it stop in the only way he knew how, so he turned to Josh and said something I'll never forget. He liked his real dad more than him. Josh froze. It was like the words hadn't even registered at first. He just stood there shocked. He asked Max what he was talking about, and Max, completely innocent and oblivious, repeated it. He said he liked his real dad more than Josh, because his real dad never shouted. His real dad was nice. I could feel the blood drain from my face. I turned pale, I know I did, and in that moment, I knew there was no talking my way out of this. I should have laughed it off. I should have said Max was just being a kid, that he didn't know what he was saying. But I couldn't. The fear and guilt were all over my face, and Josh saw it. I knew it was over. The truth had slipped out of my control, and there was no going back. Josh didn't say anything for a minute. He just stared at me, waiting for me to explain. But I couldn't. I couldn't find the words. Then he kept pushing, telling me to fess up. He kept pushing until I finally broke down and told him the truth. Max wasn't his. He was Matt's. And for months now, I'd been secretly letting Matt meet with Max behind Josh's back. Josh? It was like I watched him break in real time. His face crumbled. I could see the hurt, the betrayal, the disbelief. He looked like he had 1,000 things to say, but instead he just went quiet, completely silent. He didn't yell, he didn't scream, he just went to pack a bag. I followed him, begging, trying to explain, but he wouldn't listen. He packed his clothes in silence, grabbed the bag we had just been fighting about, and took the receipt too. Every time I tried to stop him, he would push me out of the way. He was barely even looking at me. He looked so hurt, I would have even preferred it if he screamed at me. I begged him not to leave. I told him we could fix this, that I was sorry, that I made a mistake, but he wouldn't listen. He just kept pushing past me, methodically packing like he was on autopilot. There was nothing I could say to fix what I'd done. He left without another word. I remember sitting there in the silence after he walked out the door, wondering how I let it get this far. I had been so scared of ruining everything, of losing the life we had built together. But in the end, my lies destroyed it all anyway. And now, I'm just here, alone. That was 3 days ago. I've tried calling him, texting him, but nothing. He won't answer. I've just lost the best thing that ever happened to me because of a lie I told so long ago. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. Josh is gone, and I have no idea if he's ever coming back. Max keeps asking where his dad is, and I don't know how to answer him. I'm terrified that I've destroyed our family, and the worst part is, I don't even know how to explain it to my son. I know I messed up. I know I should have told Josh the truth from the beginning. But now that everything's blown up, I don't know if there's any way to repair the damage. So Reddit, what do I do? How do I fix this? Is there even a way to fix it? Or have I ruined everything for good? Update. Hey Reddit, it's me, Ashley. I got completely devoured in the comment section after my last post. Wow, I didn't expect the backlash to be that bad. Honestly, when I made that post, I asked you guys not to judge me too harshly. I knew I wasn't exactly the hero of my own story, but wow, you guys didn't hold back. You absolutely devoured me. Every insult you could think of, every harsh truth I was trying to avoid, I've heard it. And the DMs? Don't even get me started. My inbox is flooded with people telling me exactly what they think of me. And let me tell you, there is nothing I haven't heard at this point. I got everything from, you deserve this, to, how could you do this to your family? So you know what? Just forget it. I get it. I'm the bad guy. But I didn't come here to dwell on the hate, as much as it's been overwhelming. I'm here to give you an update, even though part of me was too scared to post again. It's been a week since I made that initial post, and, well, things haven't exactly gotten better. In fact, they've gotten worse. I've been trying to get in touch with Tom, my husband. Or at least he still was my husband before all of this went down. But it's like he's disappeared. It's been radio silence. I haven't heard from him in days. No calls, no texts, nothing. At first, I thought he just needed time to cool off. I figured he'd come home eventually, even if it was just to pack a bag or talk things over. But that hasn't happened. I'm starting to get frantic. Every day that goes by without hearing from him makes the pit in my stomach grow deeper. I reached out to his closest friends, his family, even people he hasn't spoken to in years, but no one had any answers for me. Every time I asked if they've heard from him, they all say the same thing. No, they haven't heard from him. I can hear the judgment in their voices too, even if they don't say it outright. They know what I did, and none of them are going to let me forget it. And then there's Max. God, this is the worst part. Every time he asks about his dad, I have to lie. I tell him that his dad is just busy with work and that he'll be home soon. But even Max is starting to sense that something's off. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for, and Max has picked up on how awkward and weird things are. I can see it in the way he looks at me, the way his little brows furrow when I tell him the same story over and over again. I don't know how much longer I can keep this charade going. I don't know how to explain any of this to him. After a week of this torture, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to go to Tom's office. I figured if he wasn't answering me, maybe I could catch him there and force him to talk to me. But when I got there, I found out he had requested time off. No one at his office had seen him either. That's when the panic really set in. Where is he? Where could he be? I don't know what to do anymore. I've called him countless times. I've sent him texts, emails, everything. I've left voicemails begging him to talk to me. I just want to sit down with him, to explain, to apologize again, and try to fix this. I know I messed up. I know I fucked things up beyond repair, but I need closure. I need to know what he's thinking, where his head is at, whether he's ever going to come home, or if this is it. Looking back, I can see how foolish I was to let it get to this point. There's no excuse for it. I let myself get caught up in this illusion of control, thinking I could manage everything and keep Josh in the dark. But you can only juggle so many lies before they come crashing down. I've spent so many nights lying awake, replaying everything in my head. The guilt is eating me alive. I know I brought this on myself, and I know I don't deserve any sympathy for what I did. But that doesn't make this any less painful. I wish I could take it all back. I wish I hadn't let things get this far. I wish, more than anything, that I hadn't broken the one good thing I had in my life. I don't know where Tom is, but wherever he is, I just hope he knows how sorry I am. I hope he knows that I'd do anything to make this right, even if it's too late. Update. Hey Reddit, Ashley here. I've got an update, and I've been so scared to post it. My heart feels shattered, and I've cried as much as I can. Honestly, I don't even know how to feel anymore. There's only so much I can do, and I'm exhausted. So I finally got in contact with Josh a few days ago. He said we needed to talk, and I knew where that was headed. He came over to the house, specifically when Max was at school. We had a long conversation, but really it was just the same thing over and over again. Me begging him to listen, begging him to give me another chance, to try and fix things. I told him how sorry I was, how scared I had been to tell him the truth, how I didn't want to lose him, but none of it mattered. He was done with me. He said there was no way he could ever forgive me. It wasn't just the fact that I hadn't told him Max wasn't his son. That was bad enough. But he was even more hurt that I had been secretly setting up meetings between Max and Matt behind his back. Josh said I'd betrayed him in the worst way, and he was finished with me. He wanted his name off Max's birth certificate. He just couldn't live with the lie anymore. I cried so hard. I won't even sugarcoat it or pretend I was strong in that moment. I broke down completely. After Josh left, I felt like my world had crumbled around me. I had to call my mom to pick up Max from school because I was too broken to even function. I just sat there, numb. For a few days, that's all I did. Cry, feel sorry for myself, feel scared. But then I realized that crying wasn't going to change anything. I had betrayed Josh, and there was no coming back from that. He wasn't going to forgive me, no matter how much I wanted him to. And no one else was going to fix this for me. I had to get up and face reality. I couldn't wallow in self-pity forever. The house we've been living in? Yeah, it belongs to Josh. It's a premarital asset, and he made it clear that he wants Max and me out. He gave us 2 weeks to get everything together and leave. So now I'm scrambling, trying to figure out where to go. I don't have many options, and it's looking like I'll have to move back in with my mom. The thought of it makes me sick because we don't have a good relationship. There's a lot of baggage from my childhood that we still haven't dealt with, but I have no other choice. I can't be homeless with my kid. I'm just so destabilized. I don't even have a real job. The little work I do is more of a hobby than a career, and it barely pays enough to cover my own bills, let alone take care of Max. I don't have a college degree, just a high school diploma. I dropped out of college because of Matt. My parents warned me about him, but I didn't listen. I was so stupid. And even when I met Josh, he encouraged me to go back to school a few times, but I never did. He was taking care of everything financially, and I didn't think it was necessary. Now I'm kicking myself for not going back. I could have had something solid to fall back on, but instead, I'm left with nothing. What am I supposed to do? I feel like everything is happening so fast, and I'm terrified. I just want to lie down and sleep for a very long time. Or maybe get a time machine and go back to fix everything, but of course that's impossible. So I have to move fast. I can't afford to let things overwhelm me because I have a child who depends on me. Max can't feel the weight of my mistakes. He's innocent in all this. I'm the one who messed up, not him. But how do I even explain to him that we're no longer going to be the happy family we used to be? How do I tell him that everything is different now because of what I did? He's too young to understand, and I don't want him to feel like any of this is his fault. And you know what's ironic? Ever since this whole mess started, I haven't heard a single word from Matt. The man who was always hounding me to meet up, who caused all this chaos in the first place, has completely disappeared. It's been about 2 weeks, and I haven't heard a thing from him. It's like he's washed his hands of the situation and doesn't want anything to do with us now. It's just weird. I don't know what to make of it, but I can't even focus on him right now. I'm too tired. I'm just tired of all of it. I don't know how I'm going to rebuild my life, but I know I have to. For Max. For myself. This whole thing has left me wrecked, but I can't stay wrecked forever. Update. Thank you all so much for the helpful tips and advice you've given me. The amount of hate has been overwhelming, but it's comforting to know that some of you have genuinely tried to offer practical suggestions. As many of you suggested, I've decided to pursue taking Matt to court for child support. I'm not naive. I reached out to him and told him that if he didn't agree to support payments voluntarily, I would have no choice but to take legal action. At first, he was furious and tried to manipulate and gaslight me, but I stood my ground. Eventually, he agreed to negotiate a suitable amount for support, likely because he wanted to avoid court. So, at least now, I have some assurance of financial support for Max, which is a small relief. I am so sorry for the delay in updating. I've been swamped with packing and moving. It wasn't a huge amount of stuff, but I've been utterly drained and overwhelmed, which made the process feel endless. Most of the things in the house were bought by Josh, including Max's bed, toys, and other belongings. When I asked Josh if I could take these items, he refused. He said he had bought them and would list them for sale instead. I argued that it wasn't fair and that he had no use for them now, but he wouldn't relent. He was firm about not forgiving me easily for what I had done, so I had to leave without Max's things, which made the move even more difficult. We've now settled into my mom's place. She's been kind enough to let us stay, but I've been immediately reminded of why I didn't want to come here in the first place. Our relationship is so strained, and living here is just making things harder, especially since I'm already going through so much. I don't have many options, though, so I have to make the best of it until I can find a job and save up enough to move out on my own. I was also served with legal papers. I didn't even think to update until now because honestly, I'm just so exhausted. I feel like every ounce of strength has been drained from me. Matt is now seeing Max a bit more than before, but it's still not as frequent as it was when everything first blew up. It's like he's backing off a little, but I can't really tell what his intentions are or why he's changed. I'm just trying to keep it all together for Max's sake. Update. Hey Reddit, it's Ashley again. I'm really sorry for the radio silence. Things have been absolutely chaotic, and to be honest, the constant negativity here hasn't made it any easier. I'm just going to lay everything out in one go to avoid having to keep updating. I've been getting hammered with criticism, and I'm exhausted from it. Yes, I know I was wrong. I know I messed up, and I get that you all keep hammering that into my skull. Believe me, I am fully aware of my mistakes and the consequences they've brought. I don't need constant reminders. I'm already dealing with enough guilt and regret as it is. I'm trying to move forward, make things right for my son, and rebuild my life. If you have constructive advice or support, I'm open to it. But the endless criticism isn't helping. It's just adding to the weight I'm already carrying. So here's the update. The divorce is officially finalized. It went pretty quickly, all things considered. I didn't qualify for alimony or spousal support because, in my state, you need to be married for at least 10 years for that to apply. Given that I wasn't married that long, that makes sense. I did get custody of Max because, despite Josh not being his biological father, his name was still on the birth certificate. It's a bit of a legal mess, but the court recognized Josh as Max's legal father. Josh didn't want to keep being involved, so I got full custody. He was ordered to pay child support, but he flatly refused. Honestly, I don't blame him for not wanting to pay. I wouldn't have paid him either if the roles were reversed. It's just how it is. As for the house, it was his property before we got married, so I didn't have any claim to it. A couple of months after the divorce, Josh did finally get his name removed from Max's birth certificate. This meant he legally didn't have to pay child support anymore, though he wasn't paying it anyway. It's wild to see how he just walked away from everything once he discovered Max wasn't his biological child. It's disappointing, it's just so cold. On the plus side, Matt has been paying child support regularly. He grumbles about it, but the amount is decent and it helps a lot. I don't let his complaints bother me. I just focus on what's best for Max. Matt also tries to see Max as often as possible. Max is still confused and misses Josh a lot, but at least he has some form of paternal figure in his life, which helps. My mom managed to get me a job. I won't go into details for privacy reasons, but it's a low-paying position. It helps cover the bills, so that's a relief. I'm considering going back to school, which is part of why I'm staying at my mom's for a while longer. Even though being here isn't ideal, she's making an effort to repair our relationship, and I'm trying to make the best of it. So that's where things stand. I'm just focused on surviving and making things as normal as possible for Max. Thanks to the few people who offered practical advice, it's been really helpful. As for the rest of you, the haters, well, you can take your negativity and shove it.